The Sun, Lord of Mysteries. Fanfiction, Chapter 131 to 140. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Chapter 131, Defeat. The 7th of September 1110. A day that will live on in the annals of time. The sun and moon clashed, almost destroying the world. The battle between the eternal blazing sun and the evernight goddess nearly erupted in the sky above the world, only to be stopped in the final moments by Earth Mother, saving the world from the wrath of the sun and moon. The sudden war of gods was unknown to the men. They were aware, however, that the entire tense situation on the northern continent had just escalated a whole new level. The gods, on the other hand, learned about the cause of the war immediately afterwards, through their authorities. The enemies of the sun god rejoiced at the news, as they now have the goddess of night on their side. Evernight goddess remained silent about her position at the start of the war, despite the fact that she was already leaning towards the Lord of Storms, God of Knowledge, and God of Steam. She even secretly sent assistance to their armies. The Evernight goddess had finally chosen her side in the upcoming war by withdrawing her blessing from Edward. It was a declaration of war. The 8th of September 1110. The Church of Evernight Goddess officially entered the war, immediately sending half of their troops to the battlefield in Clyde Valley, under the divine miracle of night. Immediately following that, the Church of God of Combat declared war on the Church of Evernight Goddess, breaking their short-term alliance. They sided with the Church of Eternal Blazing Sun. These abrupt changes have swept the globe, putting an end to other conflicts and drawing the attention of all the gods to the war between the 7 Orthodox churches. The true Creator also sided with the alliance of 4 churches in the war. Everyone seemed to have managed to put aside their differences in order to deal with Eternal Blazing Sun. They were like hawks, searching for the Eternal Sun's Achilles heel in order to bring him down once and for all. Clyde Valley, Hornassus Mountain. The scorching rays of the sun glinted indifferently across the hellscape, illuminating the red valley dotted with mountains of corpses. Ads by PubFuture. The horns of war continued to blow, sounding a symphony of calamity for all ears. The tropes collided, staining the land in blood and fire. Through their tears, the men and women faced each other with valor. They fought day and night until that was all that remained in their minds. Some fought for their life, others for their dream, for hope, for faith, for love, for honor. At the end of the day, it didn't really matter what they fought for, just like their own lives. It was a cruel and harsh truth. And now, everything is coming to an end at the hands of a descending angel. They raised their heads in unison, gazing at the sky, which had been ripped apart by a mighty roar. A crimson light erupted from the cracks and descended on them. It ripped their bodies apart, causing them to disintegrate into falling ashes in a fraction of a second. There were no screams or shouts. They just faded into thin air. Forgotten and buried, swept away by the tides of time, never ever to be remembered again. Destruction had descended on the Clyde Valley in the form of Diana, Angel of Wisdom. She brought utter annihilation to the troops of night and storms by just descending on the battlefield. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Dust and smoke filled the air, covering nearly the entire battlefield. Diana emerged from it, dressed in black armor and wielding a crimson spear in her right hand. The spear was emitting light stakes that were shattering reality. It radiated a destructive aura, as if it could harm a true deity. The Spear of Longinus. The mere appearance of Diana put enormous pressure on everyone, as cries of pain and terror erupted across the battlefield. Diana took a step forward, her face emotionless, her eyes indifferent. She dashed towards the sea of troops, sonic waves spreading around her, clearing the smoke and dust from the battlefield. The angels of 4 churches descended on her path and braced themselves for flight, duty and faith triumphing over despair. Ads by PubFuture. They attacked her with all they had. Colossal thunder cracked, a white tower rose, a tsunami of darkness surged, an illusory beam whizzed. It was in vain, however, as a swung of her crimson spear destroyed their attacks and killed 2 of them in a fraction of a second. Diana rushed towards them, her spear raised high into the sky, her eyes dull and indifferent. The angels refused to give up hope. They bravely raised their weapons and dashed towards the angel of destruction. At the tip of the spear, a blaze of crimson light gathered, emitting a cataclysmic aura. Diana aimed her spear at them as the light intensified, almost illuminating the entire Clyde Valley. Stop, Through the disorder and chaos came an indifferent voice. Silver light beams shone down from the dark sky, forming an illusory stacked feathers in front of Diana. A figure with long silver hair appeared beneath the enveloping feathers, holding an inverted dark cross. Ouroboros, Angel of Fate. Ouroboros' gaze was fixed on Diana as he waved his hand at the angels of gods, directing them away from here. By entering the battlefield, you have violated numerous unspoken laws. Indifferently, he stated, leave immediately, or face the wrath of the gods. Diana's dull eyes finally seemed to shine with a dim light, her lips forming a tragic smile. Ouroboros, she said this while pointing her spear at him. I honestly couldn't care less. Diana charged with all her might at the Angel of Fate, aiming for his heart. Akasas won't be here to save you this time, Ouroboros said, pointing the inverted cross at Diana, who was charging. It was I who prophesied your rise, Diana Knight. Then, I shall also be the one who breaks that fate. Ads by PubFuture. The Angel of Wisdom and the Angel of Fate clashed. A crimson light and a shadowy ocean of filth erupted, drowning each other within. The war between the kings of angels continued without affecting the rest of the Clyde Valley, as the authority of the Night Emperor shrouded that battlefield. Meanwhile, the situation on the main battlefield had deteriorated. A pincer movement was formed by the armies of Steam, Night, Knowledge and Storm. They pierced the sun, earth, twilight, and the Blood Emperor's troops in the middle like an arrow. Then, they charged with all their might towards the other end of the valley in one final charge. The angels who managed to escape from the grasp of the Angel of Wisdom led the charge, their face brimming with anticipation for the victory. Obviously, there was some impediment. The sun, earth, and twilight angels stood in their way. Bruised and battered, their gaze, on the other hand, remained unwavering. It was supposed to be a brutal battle, a fight for life and death. However, as the saying goes, things don't always go as planned. Ariana, Angel of Concealment, raised her hand, which held a bright star emblem. Then she muttered silently, I pray for the silence. The emblem emitted a terrifying divine aura that swept across the battlefield, silencing the godhood of all high-sequence beyonders, enemies and allies alike. They clashed in the absence of their godhood. Many people attempted to break the silence, but their efforts were ultimately futile. The angels of 4 churches finally dashed through the valley's end, breaking the siege of the other 3 churches, angels by overwhelming them with sheer numbers. They clinched the final victory, securing their army's passage to Trier. We will lay siege to Trier tomorrow, Ariana declared, pointing her bone sword at the sky. The city of sun shall fall under our combined might. Chapter 132, Siege. September 9, 1110. The troops of the 4 churches breached the Kali Valley, securing their path to Trier, the city of the sun. Under the divine miracle of the sun, the forces of the sun and its allies were forced to retreat from the valley to the city of Trier. The Church of Steam began carpet bombing using steam planes that blitzed through the skies of the Tudor Empire, unhindered due to the god of the sky's protection. The sudden untied assault nearly razed major cities and towns around the city of sun to the ground, while armies of 4 churches began to march towards Trier, bringing destruction and death. Meanwhile, the battle between Diana and Ouroboros ended in a tie, with neither side having the upper hand. They were also compelled to retreat to their sides. They did not, however, leave the battlefield, but instead joined the war. Diana Knight took command of her side after gaining the approval of the sun, earth, and twilight. While Ouroboros remained at war solely to restrain Diana. September 10, 1110. Under Diana's leadership, drastic actions and measures were implemented in the armies. The defenses were constructed from the Sun City to the Andal Mountains, a massive wall built from pure information. It was quite long, nearly 100 kilometers in length, and it was erected in one go by Diana Knight using the hermit uniqueness. Diana then performed a literal miracle by visualizing a Nobel phantasm of Gilgamesh, king's signal cannon, from a tale she heard from her lord. She fortified the walls with the golden cannons, connecting them to the Sun City. All of this, however, eventually drained her and forced her to temporary slumber. September 11, 1110. The armies of 4 churches finally arrived at Trier's massive walls, and the long siege began. Ads by PubFuture. The 31st of November 1100. Trier, Tudor Empire. Blaise Larson stood atop the weathered and cracked bell tower, looking down at the hellscape, which was drenched in blood and fire. The air smelled strongly of anxiety and fear. The golden cannons on his sides continued to fire golden beams of energy, heading for their enemies. However, it was obstructed by illusory curtains woven with esoteric symbols that shrouded their adversaries. The sky was filled with dark and white clouds, with occasional lightning and light flashes. From the other side, there were also continuous attacks on the colossal walls. Some collided with the wall, while others were obstructed by dimming protective layer. Blaze looked at it all with dull eyes while manipulating his marionettes to gain information from the other side. However, his efforts were not always fruitful. The angels of knowledge have far too keen eyes for any slight anomaly. But he didn't give up, creating new and strange marionettes to get around their perception. A few seconds passed, then Blaze suddenly found his threads were cut off by a dark force. His connection with all of his marionettes disappeared. Again, Blaze sighed, dropping his hand. Then, he turned to look at the desolate city of Sun, his eyes flashing with past memories. His expression was somber. Edward died. It was a huge blow for all of them. The news came out of nowhere, unexpected and disturbing. It changed not only them, but the entire world. Blaze didn't notice that until the war situation had devolved beyond hope. The realization made him surreal. A choice of a god. It alone shifted the tide of history. The Evernight goddess joined forces with their enemies. She made a choice, and it was resounding. It brought down their friend, hope, and dream. Ads by PubFuture. It was also the straw that broke the camel's back. The 7 Orthodox churches were at full war. This began to affect the entire world, as most of other conflicts have ceased. All of the gods are now concentrating solely on the situation and preparing for war with the sun god. The eternal blazing sun. Blaze has not seen his lord since Edward's death. Nonetheless, his lord still answers his prayers, occasionally giving instructions. Their lord should also be preparing for the war of the gods. Though, he can clearly feel it. His lord must have been deeply affected by Edward's death. It was actually quite clear to all those with keen eyes. For the past 2 months, the eternal sun has been dimmer than ever. Blaze can somewhat guess the intention behind the action of the Evernight goddess. Edward, like the rest of them, was more than just an angel under the eternal blazing sun, he was also an important anchor for their lord. And now he's died, slain by their lord. This alone would be enough to shake the lord's anchors. By withdrawing her blessing, the Evernight goddess truly struck their lord's Archie's hell at a critical moment. Blaze sighed, his eyes still dull. There was nothing he could do about their lord's situation except pray and hope for a miracle. Oh, the irony, thought the miracle invoker, his gaze darting to the sky. An explosion of light and darkness rattled the walls. 2 blurry figures collided in the divided sky, sweeping the clouds away. It was Lucas who was fighting Ariana for 32nd time in the last 2 months. Lucas was hell-bent on destroying the Church of Evernight. His insanity, rage, and despair were obvious to all. Blaze can understand Lucas's anger and madness so clearly, as he also feels it in his heart, more than even Lucas. NOVELBJN.C. Ohm. However, he restrained himself. He cannot let himself fall. He needed to stay sensible, as he was always the rational one. He needs to be there for them when everything comes crashing down. Like as if it is not already. Blaze shook his head, shaking off the negative thoughts. His gaze finally drawing towards the war. Ads by PubFuture. Diana and Ouroboros. They were still restraining each other in the war while also overseeing it. Though, in terms of actual war, they were still holding fast to Diana's defense. The winds of war were not in anyone's favor. However, the Church of Steam was deploying many of their new inventions at them in an attempt to break a deadlock. Blaze even saw a massive metal puppet. The Angels of Steam, on the other hand, dubbed it Gundam. To put it mildly, it was terrifying. They only won by fully activating the King's signal cannon. Nonetheless, their losses were astronomical. To be honest, the war between the churches didn't really matter anymore. Blaze could now actually feel it in the air. The faint sense of calm and serenity in the background of disorder and chaos. The type that existed prior to the arrival of the cataclysmic storm. He witnessed their people's dwindling hope. Their hearts were gradually consumed by the darkness of despair. Their bright eyes are gradually losing their radiance in the face of the unchanging war. The armies led by the storm and night conquered their lands. Everything was gradually falling apart. The world was turning gray, with not a speck of light in sight. They did it, Blaze suddenly realized, his perception becoming clearer than ever. They actually did it. There was a rumbling in the substratum of reality. It was faint and distorted, but he could hear it clearly. The resounding rumble caused his heart to quiver and his bones to rattle. No, he muttered in agony. The anchors of their lord were shaking. Rumble. The rumbling became increasingly loud, forcing him to his knees in an instant. The ground beneath his feet was also trembling, as if the rumble had begun to affect reality itself. Ignoring the searing pain, Blaze looked up at the sky. His blurry gaze witnessed the rise of a colossal tree, only to be immediately followed by a gigantic white tower. The War of the Gods has begun. Chapter 133, The Beginning of the End. Leodoro, the Lord of Storms, mounted his horse and rode towards Trier, heralding the tempest in the brightest sky. The continents were cracking and the oceans were surging in his path. The eternal sun in the sky was dim. Its light is weaker than ever. The god of the sky could feel it, and the anchors of his sworn brother were quivering. It was all slowly but surely collapsing on itself, sounding the symphony of Arcus's demise. It was heavenly to his ears. His oceanic blue eyes glinted with excitement. Humanity. It was the catalyst for the demise of the Arcuses. Despite wielding such great power and authority, he spent the majority of it on his insignificant and puny angels. Why did he do that? Leodoro reflected. Compassion, kindness. It was ridiculous. Gods should not have such feelings for their angels. They are, above all, divine beings. Angels are nothing more than ants that should crawl under their feet, expressing only the utmost obedience and loyalty. However, Arcuses appeared to think otherwise. He looks after his angels as if they were members of his family. That thought disgusted Leodoro. A bolt of lightning struck the sky, illuminating his path and striking down on the ocean. It set off a wave that reached the stormy sky, rolling towards the southern continent. Time really changes everything. Arcuses, the white angel, changed to this. It truly astounded him to see the once indifferent and proud white angel transform into this frail being. And, indeed, at the start of the United Empire, his power dwarfed even that of Sosrir, true creator. To put it mildly, his rise was meteoric. But, in the end, what difference does it make? Here Arcuses was, weak and frail. His anchors were trembling, his strength was fading, and ironically, it was his own actions that brought about his fall. He had the hermit uniqueness, and it could have easily swayed Artisan's position to join his side in this war. Despite knowing this, Arcuses granted it to a puny woman under him. And all he got out of it was Artisan's hatred. Nothing more and nothing less. Then, he invaded the southern continent so brazenly for another one of his angels. Yet again, he gained nothing from it, other than the offending Mad Salinger. As for the uniqueness of Chained, it was actually more of a threat than an asset. Ads by PubFuture. Arcus's actions were utterly ludicrous. For his angels, he consciously made the worst possible choices. The consequences were now coming back to bite him in the back. The worst of the consequences was Ammonize's choice. In the beginning, she wasn't explicitly leaning on either side. However, in the end, she made a logical decision, siding with them after coming to the realization of the situation of Arcuses. It was truly satisfying to see his angry yet helpless expression after Ammonize struck his Archie's hell. It was his humanity. It was truly his undoing. Leodoro rode the black horse and marched towards Trier. Avalon, the divine kingdom of Arcuses, to be specific. The war has already begun. The gods of both sides are about to face each other. Leodoro is aware that there are still some unknown factors in the war. Sosrir, Cheek, Trunsoest. Their participation in the war is still in question. He is, however, fairly certain that Sosrir will not participate in the War of Gods. It was just a gut feeling. Even if they do take part, it will have no effect on the main battlefield. He, Artisan, and Harabergen had made adequate preparations to prevent any interference in their main battlefield. This was a golden opportunity. Arcuses was in his most vulnerable state. Nobody wanted to blow this opportunity. They even put aside their differences just for this purpose. Today truly marks the end of the eternal sun. November LBJNN. Now, Leodoro wasn't going to besiege Arcuses alone. After all, a wounded tiger is the most dangerous beast. And, the one who was joining him wasn't actually Harabergen. It didn't surprise him that much when the dragon said he didn't want to fight on the main battlefield unless absolutely necessary. Ads by PubFuture. It was known fact that the dragon of betrayal was never one to take chances. He was far too cautious for his own good. This didn't really matter to Leodoro because he didn't give a damn about their agreement. He had no intention of waiting for a fair fight with Harribergen. The sun's uniqueness was his and his alone. However, Leodoro could still understand Harribergen's trepidation. Akas's was a menacing opponent, whether weakened or not. However, he was not overly concerned. He will be triumphant in the end. It didn't matter even if Akas's had any last cards up his sleeve. His absolute confidence was due to the one who was joining to besiege Akas's. It was none other than. The stormy heavens were suddenly swept away in the middle, revealing a beautiful woman dressed in a layered black gown with countless sparkling specks of radiance like the stars. Ammonizes, Evernight goddess, Akas's is moving his divine kingdom to astral world above Trier. Ammonizes said ethereally. I noticed, Leodoro said solemnly. Let's set off and slay Akas's. I have been waiting for this day for a long time, almost a lifetime, maybe. Ammonizes nodded silently, the darkness thickening around her and the crimson moon gleamed brightly behind her head. Then, they took off to the astral world, heralding the arrival of the night and storm across the material world. The eternal sun shall fall into the abyss of storm and darkness and be forever extinguished. In the Bone Cathedral, Eamon looked at the divided sky, adjusting his monocle. Ads by PubFuture. Who do you think will triumph, my zealot brother? He asked, turning to face Adam, who was praying in front of a massive cross. Adam stood up from his genuflecting position and opened his eyes. He turned to face Eamon. Who do you believe? He returned the question. For a split second, Eamon looked up at the stormy sky through the window of the Bone Cathedral. Akas's, he eventually responded. Adam gently smiled, his gleaming eyes looking up at the astral world, witnessing all that was about to unfold. In a realm filled with infinite light, Akas's rested his head on Lilith's lap, eyes closed and arms crossed. It is beginning. Lilith leaned in and whispered in his ear. Akas's opened his dimmed eyes and said, caressing her cheek. It is, indeed, the beginning of the end. I'll hold Harribergen off, Lilith said. Akas's smiled and rose to his feet with Lilith. He nodded and continued asking, holding her hands. Do you not wish to say or ask anything? We made a promise to each other. And I am willing to answer any question. No, Lilith smiled, pressing her finger against his lips. I already understand. She tightened her hold on his hands, kissing him on his lips. I will be there in the ramen shop after the war. Now go, Akas's. The time is nay. Akas's beamingly smiled. A golden flame erupted and shrouded his figure, burning his casual clothing to ashes and revealing white armor with golden, glinting streaks beneath. His iris became vertical, gleaming brightly in the golden light. Wait for me. Akas's kissed her lips passionately before turning back and walking into the infinite expanse of light. Lilith stood there in silence, her firm gaze fixed on the disappearing figure of Akas's, watching him leave for the war. Chapter 134. Earth, Twilight and Demonces. Earth. Masin, City of Knowledge. It was a holy city for those seeking knowledge and the truth. It was filled with towers that burned like diamonds in the darkness of night. The city was shrouded in a fabled legend. It was said that the god of knowledge and wisdom frequently strolls through the streets, holding his mysterious book of knowledge, and those who can find him in the bustling city will be given the opportunity to ask God himself a question. This alone drew people from all over the world to Masin, filling the streets with hope and dreams. The city was a beacon of wisdom, shining its light on the world. However, the beacon began to dim as the light was extinguished by a powerful force of earth. The trees and plants began to sprout throughout the lands of Masin, cracking the ground and quickly growing to the height of a person. The towers, palaces, and buildings began to collapse one after the other as the whole city began to shake to its very foundations. Some of the trees were wildly absorbing nutrients from unknown sources in other places. They rose one by one, eventually reaching heights of tens of meters. The leaves were like umbrellas, and the branches were thick. The trees, which were a symbol of life, ironically reaped the lives of countless lives with their advent. These massive trees were linked together and covered the entire sky of Masin. The city of knowledge had turned into a primeval forest in an instant, razing the holy land to the ground within a few moments. Ads by PubFuture. Out of it rose a gigantic luminescent tree, dwarfing everything. Its branches reached the horizon, and its roots penetrated the core. It was as though the tree was trying to encompass the entire earth in its embrace. Immediately following that, an illusory white tower appeared. Every level was made up of thick books. Each book had a brass eye on it. The higher one went, the darker it got. It was filled with the aura of insanity, destruction, inauspiciousness, and disaster. It extended into the sky, as though it encompassed the entire world within itself, including the colossal tree. On the Earth Mother fought against the god of knowledge and wisdom. The boundless oceans. The surging and restless waves of the blue ocean suddenly calmed as a haunting silence shrouded the boundless ocean. It was as though they had been silenced by a mighty force. Then it appeared, rising from the depths of the blue ocean and dyeing it black. It was a bronze gate that pierced right into the end of the material world. The gate swung open, breaking the silence with a surge of still darkness, like a beast liberated from its rusted chain. With it, a structure appeared in the material world, dimming the eternal sun in the astral world just by its presence. The structure was an inverted pyramid with infinite layers stacked on top of each other, swirling into the thick and still darkness. The twisted and broken figures of countless beings morphed across the structure. Their mouths were open, tearing apart their cheeks, and they shrieked a blood-curdling scream laced with pure terror and fear. Ads by PubFuture. It was known by many names along the long river of time: Avenues, Tartarus, Hades, Gehenna. It was an inferno of pain and flame and ice, where every nightmare had long since come true. In this era of gods, they call it the underworld. The gates of the underworld had swung open, releasing darkness, a thick and still darkness that soared toward the eternal sun in the high heavens, as if it wanted to devour it. But something obstructed its path, a kingdom that arose from the end of time. It was adorned with countless palaces, towers, and fortified walls. NOVELBJN.com. Throughout the kingdom, there were numerous eye-catching murals depicting giants and dragons battling demonic wolves, mutants, devils, and phoenixes. The drawing was rough yet vivid. The kingdom was perpetually enveloped in twilight. It was grand, magnificent, otherworldly, and something that would only appear in the fables and legends of history. It was the Twilight Kingdom. The underworld and the Twilight Kingdom clashed in the boundless oceans. Still darkness and waning twilight submerging both of the divine kingdoms. In the boundless oceans, the god of combat fought against death, the eternal sleeper. Infinite sky. Ads by PubFuture. Street. Milan. It was a magnificent city built on the riverbank. It was a city with narrow avenues and long bridges. The sky towers stood in the center, surrounded by thousands of houses. The towers were graced with a twilight-bathed sword emblem at the top. Even during wartime, it was filled with the vibrancy of life and the resolution of twilight. It was a city that was both beautiful and contradictory. The Andes mountain range, which ran from St. Milan all the way through the entire Trunsoest Empire, suddenly quaked to its core. Something was awakening, and it was transforming the essence of the mountain into a boom. The peaks of mountains exploded, spewing lava and charcoal into the sky. The rumbling echoed all over the world. It was so loud that the sky appeared to fall down and kiss the war-torn earth. The gargantuan explosion ensued, resulting in an eruption of rocks and magma erupting from the mountain into the atmosphere. The continents rumbled, as a massive shockwave ripped through the beautiful city of twilight, obliterating buildings in a matter of seconds and submerging thousands of people who were still oblivious, thus instantly ending their lives without any pain or suffering. A dreary and disastrous streak of crimson fire erupted from the volcanoes, streaming towards the dimming eternal sun in the high heavens. Suddenly, the entire Onder volcanic mountain range collapsed, unleashing a volcanic landslide filled with scorching magma, rocks, dust, and smoke onto the Trunsoest Empire. It reached from the ground to the sky, consuming everything in its pits of infernal hell. It looked as though the apocalypse had dawned early on the world. At the same time, black python-like tentacles extended out from somewhere in the material world. There was an eye at the end of each tentacle, either open or closed. Any object seen by them would instantly turn into a grayish-white rock. And anything that touched the tentacle distorted as limbs and heads stretched out, turning into a good-looking woman of all sizes. The tentacles surged towards the disastrous stake of crimson fire as the grayish-white spread quickly, destroying all matter with them. They collided with a cataclysmic aura, splintering the sky into broken shards and delivering the symphony of the end. In the infinite sky, the primordial demoness fought against the Blood Emperor. Chapter 135, Steam and Order. In the astral world, which was ever more abstract than the spirit world, encompassing all of the authorities and symbols of the cosmos, there was a floating continent. The continent was enormous. It was covered in evergreen green all the way up to its oceanic blue crown. It was vibrant, teeming with life. There was a city in the middle. Even by the standards of the new era, it was a strange city. There were skyscrapers, cathedrals, and steel and gear structures that creaked in unison with the rest of the continent, resounding across the kingdom. As they went about their daily lives in the city, the residents showed no surprise. It was as if the rhythm was just like the gong of a clock to them. A massive bronze tower floated in the sky, surrounded by numerous smaller silver towers. It was, however, more towering and majestic than any other, befitting its owner, the Lord of Machinery. The god of steam and machinery peered out the window of his bronze tower, his hands clasped behind his back. His piercing gaze was fixed on the setting sun at the center of the solar system. N-O-V-E in .C Ohm. Begin, he said. His divine kingdom rumbled as massive metal doors opened in front of the floating continent, revealing a massive laser lens woven with innumerable esoteric symbols. In the machine control, the cardinals hurriedly gave it all a final check. The engine condition, protective layer, the defense mechanism, the radar, and finally the laser, which is powered by the historic authorities of the god of steam. After the confirmation, they all looked at the silver button in the center of the machine control with bated breath. Evelyn, the angel of arcane, eventually emerged from the crowd. She took a step closer to the button. She took a deep breath and slammed it with her palm, using all of her might. Countless beams of illusory and colorless light erupted from the floating continent before converging on the center of the laser lens. It morphed into a fluorescent orb, surging with immense power. Fire! The god of steam and machinery ordered coldly. Boom! The orb ejected a blinding beam of illusory light aimed at the eternal sun at the center of the solar system, disintegrating reality in its path. Ads by PubFuture. The beam of light hurled towards the golden sun, carrying the mighty power to destroy an entire star system. At the same time, in the Palace of Eternity, the Night Emperor stood on the balcony, gazing at the bright sky, where an illusory beam was heading towards the sun. His finger rubbed his golden ring, the engraved letters gleaming in ethereal light. His authority shrouded the earth, sky, and ocean, preventing the chaos of the war from affecting the rest of the world. Despite this, there was still a lot of unfortunate destruction all over the world. He did nothing about it. This was war. Death and disaster were unavoidable. His eyes finally narrowed at the blinding light, and he removed the golden ring from his finger. Then he threw the golden ring into the astral world, aiming for the eternal sun. The golden ring grew in size as it ascended to the astral world. It had almost dwarfed the entire Earth by the time it left the planet and shot towards the eternal sun, even faster than the illusory beam, and it showed no signs of slowing down. By the time it reached the eternal sun, it had grown to the same size as the gargantuan star. The golden ring fractured in front of the eternal sun, fragmenting into 5 circles of light that intersected with each other, radiating a terrifying aura of order. The authority of order erupted from the circles of light, sowing rules upon rules in reality and forming a protective layer around the sun. Just then, a blinding beam of light collided with the layer, illuminating a portion of the astral world. In the starry space, the Night Emperor fought against the god of steam and machinery. On the battlefield near the capital, Trier. Laius, the sun angel, charged forward to a woman in a dark gown with a hood, his golden sword aimed at her heart. Ads by PubFuture. The land was scorched by blood and fire. Mountains collapsed in the midst of thunder and twilight. A white tower crumbled with the rise of an ancient clock with the handles made up of worms of time. The clashing bodies and clanging swords. The odor of blood and life. The brave cries of men and women. It was more than just chaos. It was a beautiful calamity and a glorious tragedy. Through this whirlwind of disorder and violence, Laius thrusted his sword with all his might, his mind focused only on victory and honor. The hooded woman held a bone sword, her bare feet stepping on the scorched ground, rushing towards the golden sword, streaks of darkness splashing around, her lips pursuing. As the golden sword nicked her chest, her figure shimmered and faded into the darkness. Laius, eyes narrowed, immediately using his authority. His figure emitted an endless stream of pure light, transforming the battlefield into an ocean of light. There were no more secrets or mysteries under the illumination of pure light. The hooded woman appeared right in front of him, forced out of concealment by pure light. Her sword thrust didn't pause or stop, instead increasing in force and aiming for his right eye. At that moment, Laius raised his golden sword to his face at a speed comparable to that of light. Their swords collided, unleashing a storm of light and darkness and sending them flying away from one another. They immediately stood up on the battlefield shrouded in light and darkness, their figures flickering across the light and darkness, teleporting through it. Clang, clang, their swords continued to clash, golden and black blood staining and thickening the expanse of light and darkness. Regardless, their attacks remained unabated, exemplifying their unwavering determination. Suddenly, the chaos and disorder on the battlefield vanished, as if they had never existed. Laius and the hooded woman stopped fighting at the same time, finding themselves abnormally weak. Their unwavering will crumbled as they were knocked to their knees. Ads by PubFuture. Through his bloody vision, Laius saw a stream of stormy clouds and a surge of darkness rush out from behind the battlefield, instantly covering half of the sky. A blinding ray of pure light appeared on the other side of the sky and collided with the stormy darkness. All the soldiers on the battlefield fell to the ground, falling into a deep sleep as moonflowers and night vanilla graced the land. In the astral world, in an infinite pure light filled with white flowers and florets. Suddenly, a black ocean cascaded into the kingdom, causing a portion of the area to return to the storm. One by one, the flowers disintegrated under the tendrils of lightning. In the stormy ocean, Leodoro walked out. He was clad in spiky black armor shrouded in lightning. In the strong gusts of wind, his long blue hair waved. His figure radiated a cataclysmic aura. He wielded a massive blue trident encrusted with countless blots of silver lightning. Step by step, Leodoro walked forward, dragging the stormy oceans with him and cracking the kingdom. Deep within the infinite light, Acaces pulled out a golden spear. He was clad in white armor with golden, glinting streaks. A pair of massive wings emerged from his back shoulder, composed of golden features and burning with scorching flames. Leodoro's eyes narrowed in anticipation. His stride quickened, approaching the speed of a charge. It's time to end our fight, Acaces. Suddenly, thick darkness descended on the kingdom, causing another portion of the area to return to night. In the silent night, Ammonizes appeared, holding a SYTX and a crimson moon in her hands. She descended onto the dark ground, following Leodoro and fitting towards Acaces, who was dragging a colossal spear. Acaces looked at Leodoro and Ammonizes, his dimmed eyes gradually brightening. Indeed, Leodoro, once and for all. Chapter 136, Nova. The astral world was in chaos. The clashes of the mighty beings were tearing reality apart, sending violent and potent waves deeper into the cosmos. Authorities throughout the astral world were affected and stirred, weakening the very fabric of reality in many parts of the universe. The tributaries of the River of Destiny began to merge into one, innumerable fates joining together to form a long river, infinite and boundless, illuminated by the golden sun and silver lightning. The fates converged, as indescribable beings struck to the barrier, silently watching the defining developments inside. In the void, three mighty gods battled it out, their authorities unleashed upon the astral world. The storm raged, the moon screamed, the sun bellowed. Lightning struck the starless void, moonlight corrupted the heavens, light raged, disintegrating it all. Eternal blazing sun, drenched in his golden blood, held his spear high above his head, emitting an infinite amount of pure light. He appeared battered and frail, as if he were nearing his end. A blue trident encrusted in endless lightning and a black scythe shrouded in eternal darkness descended and struck his spear, producing resplendent sparks brighter than any star in the cosmos. Lord of Storms and Evernight Goddess floated above, holding the trident and scythe. Their armor and dress were shattered and torn, stained with dark and blue blood. Though their eyes were brighter, still carrying mighty power, unlike the eternal blazing sun, whose golden eyes were dimming like a star entering twilight. The eternal blazing sun loosened his grip on the spear, allowing them to exert even more force in a bid to shatter his defense. Sparks larger than planets flaring up in their clashes. The sun god moved his hand away from his spear at a speed surpassing all the material laws of the cosmos, aiming at them. Absolute light. With a ferocious grin, he spat, golden blood dripping from the cuts across his face. Ads by PubFuture. Boom. A bright light erupted from his palm. Its power was unimaginable, driving away the night and storm, submerging and hurling them across the starless void. However, the storm and night were not extinguished. They flared up once more and surged with all their might towards the sun god. Eternal blazing sun stared down at them, his ferocious grin fading and his cracked spear rising, fully prepared for another round of battle. In the astral world, the war between night, storm, and sun raged on, sounding a symphony of the end across the cosmos. Trier, somewhere on the battlefield. Lucas Reyes genuflected on the scorched ground, stabbing a white sword in front of him to support himself under the suppression of the gods. As he resisted the divine aura, his body was covered in charred cracks that went straight through his core. The most beloved of the sun god, the angel of light, felt his consciousness blurring as he struggled to shift his gaze away from the sky. The eternal sun emitted blinding rays, splattering pallets of gold across the stormy darkness which encircled the sun from the ground to the sky, filling the entire world and invading the pure light of the sun. Image here, the stormy darkness had already invaded most of the pure light. No, Lucas thought, trying his best to pull up his sword and stand up to fight. He wanted to be the angel of light to the very end. If the Lord falls, he will also fall with him in the glorious battle, fighting for the honor of his Lord to the last of his breaths. But, his arms trembled violently as his breathing weakened, his vision fading away. Idiot, a voice laced with concern sounded, as his love hugged him from behind. The authority of knowledge erupted from behind, shrouding him. Ads by PubFuture. The divine pressure dissipated as Lucas fell out of her embrace, trembling and whizzing, his throat turning red. What on earth were you thinking? Diana yelled, tears welling up in her eyes, as she and others rushed towards him. Laius knelt in front of Lucas, his trembling hand on his scarred chest, asserting his authority. A flash of light erupted, bathing Lucas and gradually healing his injuries. Diana smashed her fists on the ground to vent her emotions before grabbing her purple book and performing a mythical reenactment of the myth of the Earth Mother. Diana, Blaze interrupted her by pressing his hands on her shoulders. Look. Diana looked down at her lover, whose body was suddenly bathed in the pure light of the eternal sun, which completely healed him in a moment. Diana. Lucas awoke, dazed at the dimming sun, as Laius stood up and walked to Blaze. Bastard. Diana hugged him tightly, tears streaming down his tattered armor. Lucas embraced her as well. Lord, Lucas inquired, his head jerking to the horizon. The stormy darkness had nearly completely engulfed the pure light. Twilight had fallen on the eternal sun. What happening on the battlefield? What the hell is happening? He yelled immediately, clutching Diana's gown and looking at her and others. Heaviness and sorrow filled the air. Diana smiled, a tragic smile that spoke volumes about her sorrow and misery. But she seemed to pull herself together and spoke to Lucas. Lucas, she said, calm down. How can the future God Almighty fall for a small hurdle? For Lucas, it appeared as if his love was convincing herself more than him. Blaze walked over with Madeline and Laius, the faith in his eyes remained unwavering. But, just then, a familiar voice sounded. Hey, guys, it's been a long time, hasn't it? They looked back immediately. Blaze, Diana, and Lucas's eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of their dead friend, Edward, angel of redemption. Ads by PubFuture. Edward! Exclaimed Lucas. You are still alive. Oh my God. Diana stood up immediately, her pupils dilating at the eternal sun. In the starless void, a blue trident struck the golden spear, as Leodoro and Acaces faced each other, their twisted faces illuminated by light and lightning. N-O-Vel-B in .C Ohm. Die, Acaces, Leodoro roared at Acaces, whose bright figure was waning in the darkness. Suddenly, the crimson moon rose above them, its moonlight merging with the eternal darkness, saturating it even more so. Then, the crimson darkness cascaded down, submerging Acaces and Leodoro, freezing them. In the void that had been destroyed by the intense battle of gods, time seemed to have come to a halt. Whether it was Leodoro in battered armor covered in endless lightning or Acaces with broken wings bathing in waning light, they seemed to have become a part of oil painting. Everything stood on the spot, maintaining their previous posture. However, a dark scythe had stabbed through the back of Leodoro, piercing through his heart as it frantically drained the life of the Lord of Storms in an act of returning to the silent darkness. The dark scythe was held in the hands of Ammonizes, the Evernight goddess. It created a scene of eternal night with silence, tranquility, and repose. Leodoro slowly turned his head, looked at Ammonizes, who was shrouded in eternal night. He asked in pain, "Why?" Ammonizes just let out a chuckle. At this moment, Acaces smirked. His golden spear thrusted into Leodoro, accurately piercing his heart. "Farewell, Leodoro," he said, his reminiscent eyes flashing with past memories. I am the Nova, Akasis declared, looking up at the cosmos. All exploding, reality cremating. His waning figure emitted a scorching and invulnerable light, disintegrating the body of Leodoro. The incandescent light erupted, illuminating the starless void, the astral world, material world, and spirit world. In the midst of it all, the eternal sun rose high, as if standing above the entire cosmos, brighter and more magnificent than ever. Chapter 137, Light. The war between the seven churches ended when pure light engulfed the stormy darkness and the eternal sun rose high in the sky, proclaiming the victory of the eternal blazing sun for the entire cosmos. Sunlight splashed across the infinite starry space, into the earth and into the hearts, igniting everything in an eternal golden glow. The colossal white tower on the earth crumbled into the void, revealing the glowing tree, also fading into shimmering particles of light. The dark underworld in the boundless oceans rumbled and sank into the depths of the spirit world, and the twilight realm shimmered in the evening light and returned to the obscurity of time. The python-like tentacles in the infinite sky slowly retreated to an unknown location, while the crimson fire in the volcanoes was extinguished almost instantly with the glare of the sun. The golden ring descended from the astral world and fell on the palace of eternity, while the floating continent in the corner of the astral world darkened and turned into obscurity under the pure sunlight. In the material world, the bells of the churches of the eternal blazing sun began to ring in tandem, echoing through the lands in between. People from all over the world emerged from their homes, hiding places, or hiding spots one by one. They began by staring blankly at the bright sky with a glaring sun. They didn't cheer, shout, or vent their emotions. Their expressions were numb and their eyes vacant. They didn't know how or why disaster had suddenly ended. November LBJNN. However, the infinite light poured into the heart of all. It brought with it hope, igniting their minds to dream of a better times, a better future. Piety consumed the hearts of many, as warm sunlight bathed their figures. They raised their hands in yearning, drew the symbol of the blazing sun on their chests with their fingers, and chanted fervently. Praise the sun. Their chant was like a spark that ignited a prairie fire, drawing everyone together to chant in unison. Their blended voices thundered across the world, across the starry sky, their eyes filled with ignited hope. With light, hope burned brighter than ever. After all, light was the meaning to everything. Ads by PubFuture. Where there is light, there is also darkness. Where there is hope, there is also despair. It was like the two sides of a coin, inseparable and inextricable. The divine kingdom of the Lord of Storms on the island of Passu collapsed on itself, bringing the island down with it. Its remains polluted the entire Sonia Sea, causing a perpetual storm to erupt across it. Then, the divine statues of the Lord of Storms collapsed one after the other, dragging down all the cathedrals of storms with them. Angels, saints, demigods and the beyonders of the storm path on the battlefield suffered a severe mental blow, dropping their weapons and running almost immediately with despair covering their faces. Likewise, the churches of the god of knowledge, the god of steam, and the goddess of night tropes successively retreated from the battlefield. On the side of Trier, however, the beyonders of the churches of eternal blazing sun, Mother Earth, and God of combat made no attempt to pursue them, as cheers of joy already rang out over the troops. Many men and women knelt on the ground with their arms outstretched to the bright sky. Their cheeks were red with tears of joy and sorrow. In the end, they won. The ethereal light of the sun shone on them as well, healing the scars on their bodies and bringing them much-needed relief. In an army tent, Lucas and others gathered, storming around Edward, bombarding him with questions about his health. "Guys," Edward chuckled, his voice still frail. "I see your curiosity, no matter how hard you try to hide it. Yes, our Lord and Evernight Goddess planned this from the very beginning. But, I don't know much about the specifics of how they came to an agreement. The Evernight Goddess and our Lord combined their powers to keep my existence concealed. Our Lord might have even altered reality and history. Then, they simply locked me in a room at the Avalon. Not that I have any complaints, the room had almost everything one could want. I stayed there until the doors opened automatically, leading right to this battlefield, to you, to the exact moment of our Lord's victory. It's quite surprising, isn't it?" Edward tried to laugh it off. Nobody joined him, and the air smelled faintly of horror. "So it was all planned out from the beginning," Diana mumbled, her heart filled with horror at the might of her Lord. How far could Lord actually see? And always be right and ahead of everyone. How about your blessing, Edward? Blaze extricated himself from the shock and inquired. Wasn't it suppressing that will? She indeed took it back from me, waking me up to the endless whispers from the starry sky, Edward replied. But, using their authorities, they immediately suppressed the will. He purposely did not delve into this situation. Blaze seemed to want to ask more questions, but Lucas barged in between them, holding a cup of water and passing it to Edward. Stop with the questions, Blaze. Lucas said, look at him already. I am fine. Edward sighed, shaking his head. Says someone who looks like a twig. Lucas snorted. You are not fine at all. So, don't try to put up a tough front and drink this obediently. Ads by PubFuture. What is this? Edward sighed, taking it. It's just water, Lucas drawled. But, feeling the glare, he continued. Blessed by the Earth Mother. Edward drank the water of life in one gulp. Endless vitality poured into his body, slowly healing him. You seem upbeat, Diana said, her arms crossed. Who wouldn't be in this situation? Lucas smiled. Diana just let out a chuckle. Meanwhile, Blaze dragged Laius and Madeline, who had been silently listening in until now, to Edward. This is Laius, Angel of the Sun, and Madeline, Angel of Destiny. Don't look at them being quite. They can be quite talkative. They just didn't want to disrupt our reunion. Hello. Edward nodded at them. Laius and Madeline greeted him with a smile. The atmosphere in the tent was warm and mellow. However, it was cut short when a blinding beam of light erupted in the tent, morphing into the projection of the eternal blazing sun. Eternal blazing sun motioned for silence before focusing his attention on Lucas. Do you remember what I said to you in that restaurant that day? He inquired. Milord, you said, I will get my chance in the future, Lucas uttered subconsciously. Eternal blazing sun smiled, pulling something from the light and tossing it to Lucas, who caught it, his eyes wide with amazement. These are Sequence 1 characteristics of the Tyrant Pathway Thunder God and a card of Blasphemy Hierophant. Become the King of Angles, Lucas. After leaving that message, the projection of Eternal Blazing Sun shattered into light particles. Oh my God, Diana was shell-shocked. Her heart was once again filled with horror at the might of her lord. Ads by PubFuture. In a realm filled with infinite light, Acasus took a blot of lightning from the white ground while holding the remaining characteristic of the Thunder God. The blot of lightning was the uniqueness of the Tyrant Pathway. And he was a complete mess. His body was drenched in blood, and his wings were broken, while he felt completely drained. Just then, Ammonizes descended before him. She wasn't much better, either. Her black dress was ripped in many places, revealing her body with dark blood oozing out of the deep gashes, and one of her hands was even broken. But she didn't seem to mind her appearance. Congratulations, Acasus, on one step closer to becoming the Almighty, she said with a smile. Acasus exhaled a sigh. It's only the beginning of the end. Indeed, Ammonizes nodded, but, you don't have worry. He is unlikely to return in this epoch. You have plenty of time to prepare. For a brief moment, Acasus remained silent, his gaze fixed on the bolt. I will win, he said to himself, gripping the blot. I will win. I hope so, Ammonizes said ethereally. Then, she continued, I've already altered Lilith's concealment. It's no problem for her to be herself in front of you. This is the best I could do. That is more than enough, Acasus stated as he looked her in the eyes. And, Ammonizes, thank you for everything. This is just a deal, Ammonizes clarified. There's no need. We both know that it isn't, Acasus retorted. Ammonizes' lips pursed, a complex light flashing in her eyes. Go, she sighed in the end. Lilith is already in Trier. Clean yourself first, but don't keep her waiting. Then, I will take my leave, Ammonizes. Acasus nodded, his silhouette fading. With his departure, the infinite light in the realm was extinguished, heralding the eternal night. Ammonizes floated, shrouded in eternal night. Her silent gaze remained fixed on fading figure of Acasus. Chapter 138, Night is Still Young. Okay guys, I have started uploading on Scribble Hub. However, uploading all of the chapters from the web novel will take some time. But, I will try to finish it by the weekend. The eternal sun in the sky, illuminating a divine kingdom in golden glow, ascending to otherworldly either reality. This was a place where a few ragged sounds could suggest a symphony. A place where chaos presents patterns, idle fantasy turns into fornication, and memories feign meaning. This was a paradise. This was a utopia. This was Avalon. Image here, a castle perched on a lush mountain with a backdrop of white clouds splattered with gold palettes. Inside the dreamy castle, Aukas's rose from the streaming bathtub, taking the towels and wrapping one around his naked and chiseled body while using another to dry himself off. He walked out of his bathroom, his golden eyes shining brightly and brimming with energy, stroking his wet head with the towel. He walked into his bedroom, making his way to a white table near the bed, where a cup of steaming coffee was already nearby the bolt of lightning. He took the coffee in his right hand, finally putting an end to his head wrestling, and threw the towel on the bed. Aukas's finally took a sip of coffee, taking in all the light breath and hot steam from the coffee. His shoulders sagged, his eyes filled with relief, and he sighed contentedly. He succeeded. Ads by PubFuture. Despite his nervousness and doubts, his plans all worked out for the best in the end. He can finally unwind and enjoy the brief respite. His thoughts wandered to the past as he sipped his coffee with relish. Ammonizes was the cornerstone of his plan. He confronted her soon after Edward was given the blessing and proposed a deal. He told her about the situation at the River of Eternal Darkness and Lilith's concealment, though he suspected she already knew. Nonetheless, he put forward the information, purposefully emphasizing Salinger's goal, which was to take complete control of the tributary of the ethereal river, and he was most likely on his way to accomplishing that. Then he prospered an alliance between them. He'd help her deal with Salinger, and she'd help him deal with Leodoro. He also asked her for a way to get around Lilith's concealment. It was a win-win arrangement. He wasn't sure whether Ammonizes would agree to any of this in the end. After all, whatever he could give her, Leodoro and Harribergen could match. Nevertheless, she accepted it after staring at his figure for a few seconds. That was unexpectedly quick. It almost made him wonder if she had any ulterior motives. But now, remembering the complex look she gave him before he left, he just laughed at previous thoughts. Then he told her about the majority of his plan, the most important part being Edward's concealment. His plan was far from simple, considering he had to deceive all the other gods, including Harribergen, the omniscient one. The authority of concealment held by Ammonizes won't be just enough to achieve this. He, on the other hand, had a scheme. If you want to fool the gods, you should first fool reality. He needed to change reality in order for the world and history to believe Edward died. This was not easy to accomplish without the knowledge of other gods, and the authority required was far too great. He had thought about this problem for a long time. The Golden Order was his solution. When Adam and Aemon assisted him in seizing full control of the Golden Order, he used it not only to deal with the City of Calamity, but he also altered reality to fabricate the authenticity of Edward's death. And, even if Aemon and Adam did not assist him with the Golden Order, he had already devised another method of gaining temporary control. Returning now, his Golden Order has altered reality. Then he and Ammonizes waited for the right moment to stage that play for all of the gods to see. Harribergen. While sipping his coffee, Aukas's reflected. He still wasn't completely deceived. As expected of him. His plan worked. Whether allies or enemies, the gods believed in his woven tales. Harribergen was still cautious to the end, not taking such a valuable risk. Ads by PubFuture. He kind of expected it. Omniscience is deeply concerning, but his choice didn't matter much because his main goal in the war had always been Leodoro. The gods, war broke out. Despite his faith in Ammonizes, he devised some contingency plans in case he needed to flee the battlefield right away. He ultimately triumphed. Aukas's placed the empty cup on the table and took the lightning blot uniqueness of the tyrant pathway. He must become a dual pathway god before the War of Four Emperors resumes, with 4 emperors now on stage and 7 gods exiting the curtains, to deal with Salinger and Harribergen. Aukas's finally put his uniqueness aside and rose from his bed, walking towards his wardrobe with enthusiastic eyes. He can't keep Lilith waiting any longer. Trier. Aukas's appeared in the deserted city square, littered with debris and rumble. His figure was illuminated by the gentle silvery glow of the endless stars in the black heavens. He cast a glance over at the City of the Sun, which had been heavily damaged by the war. The air was thick with sorrow and sadness. Ignoring all of this, he made his way to the center of the square, where a small ramen stall stood, completely out of place in this ruined city. Lilith stood inside the stall, dressed in a tight black gown. She was gently blowing on the broth while finishing the ramen. She smiled brightly as she noticed him. Then she took the finished bowl of ramen and placed it in front of the counter, saying softly, "Congratulations, my love." Akasis took his seat, and without saying anything, he began devouring his love's ramen. Lilith just sat there with him, arms crossed on the counter, smiling. Ads by PubFuture. He ate it quickly, as if he was too eager to be done with it. "Calm down," Lilith chuckled. "I am not going to run away." "No," in between bites, Akasis said. "I'd waited long enough. It's nearly a century." He was done in a flash, putting the bowl away and looking at her. "Let's go to my kingdom." He spoke silently. Akasis, Lilith's figure began to change. Her blonde hair turned white, and her skin became abnormally pale, all while a white crown adorned her head and a phantom of a crimson moon formed above her. She was no longer Earth Mother, but sanguine ancestor Lilith, the ancient god described as the most beautiful of all, with another equally disgusting and ferocious side. Finally, she fully revealed herself in front of her love. Lilith looked at him, her crimson eyes shining and her voice quivering. "Do you still love me like this?" Akasis smiled as he grabbed her hips and pulled her close to him. "I will always love you, Lilith, no matter what." Lilith smiled, a smile that spoke volumes about her happiness and relief. "I love you too, Akasis." Under the blanket of stars, Akasis kissed her on the lips vehemently. He looked at her as if she were the only star in his eternal night. He kissed her as if she were the air in her lungs. "Let's go," Lilith said as she moved away from him. "You know, it's not just you who have been waiting." Akasis immediately wrapped her in a princess hug and grinned. "I'm going to make you scream tonight." Lilith rested her head on his chest, listening to his racing heart. "I expect nothing less," she said passionately. "NOVELBJN.C Ohm." Their embracing figures faded into glittering light particles. The night is still young. Chapter 139, Honorific Name. The following day, the eternal utopia, Avalon. After a long and steamy night, Akasis sat on the balcony, his eyes closed, answering the prayers in the gleaming light of the sun. The war of the gods broke the world even more than it already was. The battle between the primordial demoness and the Blood Emperor affected the entire northern continent, whereas other god battles were limited to specific battlefields but still had global consequences. Nearly 1 million died. Disease, fire, and rot had taken the most victims with their bloody and twisted claws. The shores of the northern and southern continent become completely lifeless after being bathed by twilight and still darkness. The world was wailing. He senses it. The scars of anguish and sorrow had already penetrated too deeply into the heart, and they could not be erased even with the most fervent hope. Only the times of peace can let it heal. However, the tide of history was shifting in a direction that could lead to anything but peace and order. As the 6 gods leave the stage, the true protagonists of this era will enter and submerge the world in even more pain and suffering. Akasis sat straight in his chair as he heard Blaze pray for a meeting. Then, he waved his hand, a flash of light erupted in front of him, and Blaze emerged, holding a stack of documents in his right hand. The Angel of Miracles bowed. "I deeply apologize interrupting your reprieve, my lord. However, this situation requires your immediate attention." Akasis nodded and motioned for the document. Blaze handed it over to him. He opened it and flipped through the first few pages. It described the general situation with the Church of the Lord of Storms. Then he stowed it, crossed his legs, and asked Blaze. "Briefly explain the situation, Blaze." Blaze appeared to have anticipated this, as he cleared his throat and began briefing solemnly. With the fall of their god, the Church of Lord of Storms collapsed. Ads by PubFuture. Our Lightbringers in the Trunsoest Empire have already started rounding up all Beyonders associated with the Storms. Many low and mid-sequence Beyonders are eager to pledge their allegiance to us. There are, however, some extremely pious, faithful Storm Beyonders among them. In the name of martyrdom, they even orchestrated an attack on our church and Evernight Church. Some even attempted to spread woven tales that blamed us in Evernight Church for all the suffering. The Storm Angels and Saints, my lord. Blaze took a brief pause before continuing. With the assistance of churches of Evernight, Mother, and Combat, we have captured the majority of them alive. They have, however, shown no signs of surrendering to us. He continued. The entire Trunsoest Empire was also in chaos for a while due to the collapse. Even an Angel of Storm broke the law of the Night Emperor, but he was killed by the Night Emperor himself. This radical action calmed the situation. But the Night Emperor still wants you to deal with the storm situation as soon as possible. That's all with the storm church situation, my lord. Akas's was thoughtful, tapping his fingers for a few moments, contemplating, while Blaze waited patiently. He finally made his decision. Blaze, call all the storm's angels and saints, as well as the most devoted followers. They'd been under Leodoros' control for far too long. The suppression between sequences in the Tyrant pathway is second only to the Death pathway. So, whether alive or dead, their wills are completely subservient to Leodoro. They are beyond hope. Blaze didn't seem surprised, merely nodding and accepting his orders. But then he asked, a little hesitantly, "My lord, may I turn one of the angels into my marionette?" Israel, Akasis chuckled. "Yes, you can make him into a marionette." He noticed a flash of satisfaction in his angel's eyes after receiving his approval. Ignoring that, he continued. "As for the low and mid-sequence beyonders willing to pledge loyalty, accept them into the church. And, for the remaining angel characteristics from the storm, give it to the saints who contributed the most to the war and aid them in their ascension to angel." "Should we go through you, my lord, for every ascension?" Blaze inquired immediately. Akasis nodded. "Yes. Send me the detailed report on the chosen ones, and I will finalize it before you proceed. I anticipate at least 4 more angels by the end of this decade." Blaze took the orders before asking a serious question about another important matter. "What about the faith, my lord? What should we tell the general public? The storm is still believed in by 1/5 of the Trunsoest Empire." Adds by PubFuture. Akasis remained silent for a moment before responding by combining his fingers. "Make an announcement. Let the world know that Leodoro has fallen and that I have seized his authority." Blaze gave a solemn nod. Then he inquired, "But, the Night Emperor?" Akasis said, while tapping his fingers on the armrest. "I'll speak with him personally. You carry out my order regardless of the chaos that ensues. This is essential in the long run." Blaze inclined his head in agreement. Akasis then continued. "Make an effort not to incite conflict between the Church of Steam and the Church of Knowledge. The gods are exiting the stage of the war. Both sides have already suffered significant losses as a result of this war. While the empires fought their battles across the continent, there is a need for a brief period of peace and stability between the 6 churches. But, if Church of Evernight or Church of Combat ask our the support to deal with the invasion of Biome, then send our troops. Faced with the growing threat of death, Night and Combat should rejoin their banner." Hearing that, Blaze asked, hesitantly, "My lord, in the upcoming War of 4 Empires, who should we ultimately support?" "No, vel, b, in c ohm. This is indeed an awkward situation." Akasis laughed. "Remain neutral until I tell you otherwise." Blaze gave a nod. Akasis continued after a brief pause in thought. "Begin suppressing both the Abraham and Antigonus angel families." "Blood Emperor," said Blaze, surprised. Akasis shook his head. "He is the last thing you should be concerned about." Despite his confusion and doubts, Blaze accepted the orders. Akasis inquired, handing back the documents. "Does that cover it, Blaze?" "Certainly, my lord." Blaze bowed and took the documents. "I'll take my leave and leave you to your rest." "Wait." Akasis stopped Blaze as he recalled something important and ordered him. "Remove the God of Contracts and Guardian of Business from my honorific name and replace them with Ruler of the Sky and Progenitor of Day." Blaze somberly nodded. His figure began to fade away into light particles, and he vanished from the Avalon. Akasis sighed and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes and basked in the sunlight for few minutes until Lilith emerged on the balcony, holding 2 cups of coffee. Chapter 140, Reprieve. Avalon. "Here." Lilith handed him a cup of coffee while intending to take a seat near him. Akasis took it from her grasp, but before she could sit, he gently drew her towards him, causing her to fall into his lap. "Hey," Lilith grumbled, "I'm holding a cup of coffee." "Oh," Akasis smirked, "it doesn't matter if it completely spills on me. You often seem to forget that we are gods, not some mortal couple." Lilith snorted, but she eventually sat obediently in his lap, increasing his smile just a tad. "How is it?" she inquired as they sipped their coffee. "As divine as you," Akasis said cheekily. Lilith's ears turned crimson as memories of the previous night flashed through her mind as a result of his words. She pushed the steamy images to the back of her mind and changed the subject, knowing exactly how this conversation would end, with him and her in bed. "How did you persuade Ammonizes?" Before responding, Akasis let out a sigh of disappointment. I simply stated the facts about Salinger and stated that I would assist her in dealing with him. Salinger? Lilith inquired, her brow furrowed. Did you figure out what was wrong with him? Did she not tell you? Akasis was surprised. Lilith shook her head. Ads by PubFuture. I assumed you two were friends or something like. Akasis said. No. Lilith cut in with an odd expression. What prompted you to think that way? From the beginning, it was just a deal between us. Though, now that you mention it, I am somewhat closer to her than others. However, it was completely due to our circumstances. And that is anything but friendship. You know, Akasis grinned. You both really look that way in my imagination. Lilith scowled. Akasis, how typical of you. Okay. Akasis pressed his fingers against her lips, causing her to fall silent. He then continued after kissing her lips. Where did I leave off? Ah, Salinger. He was able to connect to the river of eternal darkness. A Sephiroth. Lilith was stunned. How did he? Akasis interrupted, elaborating. He built his own underworld on the ruins of ancient underworld of the ancient goddess of death, Gregus. She was the first to actually connect to the eternal river. So, that black bird really had something like this up her sleeve. Lilith reminisced. It's no surprise, she was so haughty at the time. Well, Akasis nodded. She didn't matter in the end, did she? Though she lived longer than many ancient gods, she was still defeated by the Creator, who ruled over the entire Chaos Sea. Her single tributary was grossly inadequate. Just a tributary? Lilith asked, her troubled heart somewhat at ease. Indeed, Salinger should have inherited it from Gregus when he finished constructing his underworld, Akasis said, nodding. He should have immediately faced the river and might have fought against it all this time. He continued, solemnly looking into her eyes. You know, a tributary is still dangerous. If Salinger is able to fully control it, he will be unstoppable unless we all band together. And after what had just happened, I don't see that happening. In the end, he rolled his eyes. No. Lilith shook her hand, setting their empty coffee cups on a nearby table and leaning even more on him. It won't be like that. He cannot master it even if it's just a tributary. Salinger is not an idiot. He should know when to stop. That's the issue, my love, Akasis chuckled. Madmen often don't know when to stop. Lilith's expression became solemn as she nervously shifted in his lap. Then, she looked at them in the eyes. So you made a deal with Ammonizes just using this. Ads by PubFuture. Yeah, Akasis nodded. And, guess what, she agreed immediately to my offer. Lilith frowned. That's unlike her. I know, right? Akasis smiled brightly. That is why I think she has feelings for me. Lilith laughed, clutching her stomach. I also think that you are just being narcissistic, Akasis. Ammonize is having feelings for you. Please. November LBJNN. Akasis scowled. Says the one who has fallen hopelessly in love with the same man. Lilith's laughter died away as she kissed him on the lips. No, I don't mean you. It's Ammonizes. In comparison to us, her humanity is very low. However, there is also a chance she has feelings for you. But, it sure isn't love. She continued in a low tone, her eyes narrowing at him. In the end, does it really matter? No, my love, Akasis affirmed, sensing the jealousy in the air. It doesn't matter. Lilith snorted at his smirk and turned away, though her eyes softened. Then she went on. So, in the end, Ammonizes backstabbed Leodoro, huh? Yes, Akasis said, just like you're going to backstab your son in the future. Lilith let out a chuckle. He laughed as he continued. I believe we should form a club, you know, the Betrayers. And I shall be the leader. Lilith gave him a strange look. That's great idea and all. But enough with the jokes. His laughter died away as she went on. There are still a lot of important things that need our immediate attention, you know. Like Bethel Abraham. No, Akasis drawled, his tone indicating his annoyance. Don't bring him up right now. There is still time. He hasn't retuned from the cosmos. Ads by PubFuture. If he does, don't go barging in on him without me, Lilith asserted. It's far too risky, Lilith. He is most likely already corrupted by her, Akasis said, his eyes welling up with concern. I don't want you anywhere near him. Lilith still had a stubborn expression. Can you handle the corrupted him on your own? Regardless of what you say, I'm still not allowing you to participate in that battle. And I can handle him just fine, Akasis said, shaking his head. I will soon ascend to the status of dual pathway god. Lilith finally sighed. At the very least, bring Ammonizes or Bodial with you to that battle. Just in case. Okay, I will, Akasis promised. So, when are you going to ascend? Lilith inquired, her attention drawn to his final words. Perhaps this month. After some thought, Akasis stated. Or the end of the year. Do not promote without my presence. Lilith insisted. I won't. Akasis smiled. Lilith wanted to continue, but Akasis interrupted, hugging her and placing his head on her neck, making his hands wander into her dress. He said silently, enough with the serious subjects, my love. Remember that this is our reprieve. Lilith glared at him, sensing his hands moving into her. But she didn't stop him at all. Wasn't last night the greatest? He inquired, his voice deep and commanding. Answer me, Lilith. Yes, Lilith murmured, biting her lip and suppressing a moan as his hands reached that spot. Then let's do it all over again, shall we? Akasis asked in a way that left no room for denial. Lilith suddenly smirked as she pushed him back onto a chair, climbed on top of him, and positioned herself between his legs. Of course, my love. She stated vehemently.